Alright guys, let's go over it. The brand new updates to iShot. So, let's go over a build guide, but first off, I want to go over the patch notes that recently got put out. So what are the things to get excited about for iShots? Well, its secondary gains additional projectiles as it levels up, and also now targets within a 90-degree cone, and on top of that, the ice shards now travel further, so we basically get a 100% increased over here. So how iShot works is a little bit different than other skills. I'm just going to play the video so it kind of makes a little bit more sense here. So let's go ahead and check it out. So it shoots the enemy, and then behind the enemies, it's going to spray a bunch of ice shards. Now, you're going to get more of those, and on top of that, well, that's kind of how the skill works. So it's kind of important to, if you can, try to target some smaller monsters and then have like the elite behind it. But let's go over the skills and go over the build guide. So first off, iShot is our main skill. We pretty much just spam this until we come to a group of elites or the boss. If you guys are wondering, is iShot better or lightning arrow? I personally think iShot is really good for survivability. It definitely suffers in the boss department, but there are ways to kind of get some advantages where you get a little bit more DPS versus just spamming iShot, but it's nowhere near like the lightning arrow lightning rod with the orbit storms. I don't think that there's anything close to that in terms of like how much DPS you can output. But as far as it goes, this is my like earlier iterations. If there's any ways to improve this, definitely let me know, as well, it just got some buffs, so a lot of people are excited to kind of finally test it out because it's way better now. So iShot, obviously, is our main skill. We're using Cold Infusion, Primal Armament, Rising Tempest, as well as Fork for extra clear speed. Now, for the elites, we are going to be popping Freezing Salvo. So it's kind of like, think of it kind of like an ultimate. It doesn't have a really long cooldown though, but what we do with it is we run concentrated effects, so it kind of has a better like small area where it's hitting. And then we also run Close Combat, so we can get even more damage, just numerically gives you a bunch of stats. And we are ideally going to freeze the enemy before we use Freezing Salvo. And then we are running Hourglass, so it has a cooldown, but it doesn't really matter that it has a cooldown added into it, because unless you are waiting, the skill isn't going to have a lot of these things to kind of shoot out at once. And then we run Biting Frost. So here's how we kind of use this skill. We shoot a bunch of ice shots. Hopefully the thing is going to be frozen. We walk up to it within melee range because it's safe. We pop our Freezing Salvo and hopefully it melts. Now, in between getting the boss frozen or the elite path, we can activate things like Hypothermia. If you want to add these in, these are kind of optional here. But Persistence to make it last longer, and then the effectiveness of the curse. This reduces their resistance. Now, Frost Bomb also reduces their resistance because it applies a cold exposure to the enemy. And then we are running Wind Dancer with Clarity, Blind, and Cannibalism. And then we have Herald of Ice with Cold Mastery, Elemental Focus, as well as Magnified Effect. So when we kill enemies, what Herald of Ice does, it's going to basically just destroy everything. It basically improves our speed. Now, as far as bosses go as well, it's probably not going to do very much unless the boss has a bunch of adds. So to kind of answer the question a lot of people are wondering, since we've just been mainly playing Lightning Arrow, I like this up until the boss. The boss is going to be a boss fight that, you know, it does exist. So don't expect to have like insta melt, but it does respectable damage. Ideally though, we would get, one of the things that I am missing right now is getting my Freezing Salvo to be like 4 sockets here, or 5 linked, but if we get it to 6, I mean, this thing will absolutely obliterate. So I feel like there isn't really going to be that much of a problem in terms of bossing once we get this min-max a little bit more. In fact, most of the gear that I'm using is from my Lightning Arrow, but a lot of people want to know, is iShot good now? Because I was mentioning I really want to try it out. So we were trying it out last night, and this is kind of the results. I felt like it was suffering big time before I added in Freezing Salvo, Hypothermia, Frost Bomb for like the elite clear. The iShot clear was great, and I'm talking about like right now, we are doing like I think you'll see in the gameplay, like there's like a 7, a 10, and 11. As you start going higher in the tiers, like when you're in like the middle-ish of the map, you'll definitely see that it falls off specifically on the bosses. But the trash is like so good, and this build has excellent survivability because if it's frozen, well, it's going to be much easier. You'll see us put it in a tier 10 over here. It's just the bosses, even on the lower tier ones, where this will definitely suffer, again, compared to like Lightning Arrow. Now, as far as the gear goes, now that we went over the gems, it's pretty much the exact same as our Lightning Arrow. So if you've been playing Lightning Arrow, everything where it says like lightning damage, just roll that to cold. If you're running the same gear, like I said, I'm literally running the exact same gear. So mine doesn't even have the added cold damage, which would make this way better. It just simply has the lightning stuff. So ideally, if you can get a dual string bow, that's what you're trying to go for. Another thing I wanted to mention, and this goes with the same thing with my Lightning Arrow build, is like getting flat mana is so incredibly good. I was having a lot of mana problems problems as I started going to like the 4-socket gems. And again, when you're spamming your shots against bosses, having that maximum mana is really good, because when you have Siphon allocated as an enchant, you're able to basically recover 2% per enemy killed. And if you have way more mana, well, that 2% is going to add up to be a lot more. And again, it's kind of the same thing that you're looking for: projectile skills, attack speed, if you can get dags, cold damage, physical damage is kind of the same thing. There really isn't too much change in pieces of gear, but if you're looking at the amulet, again, if you can get projectile levels, all attributes, resistances, max life, you do want to try to prioritize getting a little bit more int in this build. Otherwise, you're going to have to put a lot of points into just like raw attributes on the tree, because the cold stuff requires you to have int. So there is a little bit of like gear swap that you may need to do if you're transitioning from Lightning Arrow, as that was kind of like the most popular build. I think that's one of the most popular builds right now for like Deadeye. But again, just cold damage, attack speed, physical, swap whatever you had with lightning to cold if you want to try it out. And then another area where you can roll maximum mana, which just really helps out, boots and the belt. But pretty much boots, movement speed, max life, max mana, chaos, fire, lightning, cold resist, any of the resistances are good. For the flask, the only thing that's important is like the seeding, which is basically instant recovery, and the mana flask honestly does not matter. Like the only thing that is important on the flasks is specifically getting that like instant recovery. And then I really like the thawing charm, but one thing that, like, if you watch the gameplay, like most of the time all the trash is completely frozen. Path of Exile 2 is a pretty hard game. There's a lot of, even just the white monsters, specifically like the gargoyles, there's a lot of monsters in general, or the guys with a giant arm cannon, that do incredible amounts of damage, even though they're like a white monster, right? They're not even elite or a blue pack that have any crazy mods. They actually hit really hard. So I may actually recommend this right now after it's been changed. The reason why I recommend this over Lightning Arrow is, sure, it may do a little bit less damage against bosses, but it is incredibly beginner friendly because everything is frozen. Like, if they're frozen, they're not doing DPS. So it is way, way more chill, no pun intended, to play this build. Now, there are going to be a lot of differences, obviously, in the skill tree, so let's go ahead and hop right into the skill tree. And let's make this maybe a little bit larger so you guys can actually see it. So, over here, we are going to scroll down. All right, so one of the bigger changes with this in terms of the tree is specifically, we don't need the lightning damage stuff right now, right? So instead of getting the lightning damage, we still will get some of these over here, so you don't really have to respec too much if, again, you've been playing Lightning Arrow. You can get some of these things called like increase damage with hits against enemies affected by elements. There's also magnitude of ailments. All of this stuff basically relates to more like chill, freeze. And then like we go over down over here to get this increased skill speed, which is really nice. And then there is another thing over here. We're getting extra chill duration and the magnitude of like chill that we're inflicting. So our goal is to essentially freeze the enemies more consistently. And there also is another change that I want to mention that you may need to do. So this area over here has like a bunch of decks. So you may need to drop this area over here, and then if you need the decks, the reason why I'm saying you need the decks is because this will be flat decks. This one you can't change, but all these like additional attributes, a lot of them will need to go into specifically like int in order for your requirements to be fulfilled. Your option to change that is on your amulet and your rings, any other areas where you can get specifically intelligence. It really helps out because this build is a little bit more hungry for the intelligence stat as a requirement. You may need to get like 1 strength. Cannibalism is a really good thing for just being able to recover really fast. So it's a very, very similar skill tree, but the ascendancy has not changed. So just endless munitions and wind ward, and we get wind ward last. So in terms of order, I would go and prioritize getting extra projectile. But this can be pretty dang good to have Tailwind. It just kind of speeds up your process for your leveling and you're going through the campaign. Just extra movement speed is key. I'd probably go Gathering Winds first, and then we get this over here. Now, you can get Point Blank or Far Shot. Far Shot will be better, obviously, for just your Ice Shot clear speed. But as you start going higher, you may notice that your boss clear speed is a little bit worse, so then you get Point Blank. It's up to you. Honestly, you'll get value out of both of them, so it doesn't really matter which one you select. But yeah, this is pretty much the build over here. If you wanted to, you could get this extra pen, but I felt like the build already has enough pen. You get over here, there's pen, and then there's also Ellie pen somewhere in the tree. But for the most part, yeah, it's a really fun build. Have some fun with it, guys, and let me know if there's any other suggestions to improve this build, as it's kind of like newer, and well, Path of Exile is kind of a newer game too, PoE2 that is, and so we're kind of discovering some newer things with the build, and I think that we can actually throw in like some cast on freeze and then throw frost wall, because the way that the skill works, you ideally want the enemy behind. If there was like a hydrosphere or a tornado in the game, you could maybe throw in tornado, but like it's just an extra step. But to fight some of the elites, you kind of need these extra steps because the damage output, it's not on like the Orb of Storms with the lightning rods. That thing is just like way too good. But again, it's a give and a take. But like I said, once you get a 6-link freezing salvo and you're able to apply like exposure with other ways, I think the build can actually be pretty dang good. Again, very, very satisfying because most of the stuff, if it's frozen, it's just no threat. And I really liked that with this build, especially if you do any like the mechanics like a ritual, or if you're doing any of the breach. Like sometimes there's just a bunch of monsters that come out and like if they're not all frozen, well, they could still jump on you, and with any evasion-based build, you're eventually going to take some damage. But we've got a lot of evasion in the tree, but I'll put everything down below for the build, but have some fun with it, guys. Like I said, it's really good. Let me go ahead and show you guys, like, when we get to the elite over here. I just love how fast it is at, this is, by the way, this was, I think, 10 or 11 here. But, like, since the enemy is just frozen majority of the time, it makes everything so chill. Like, it's just, like, he's not moving at all. We're throwing, and then you can see freezing salvo is basically a must to play, by the way. If you want to just spam ice shot, sure, you could go for it, but your clear speed is going to be just terrible when you come up to the elites and bosses. But again, we'll hopefully be able to get the build stronger, and then at that point I could just recommend this over Lightning Arrow. However, Lightning Arrow does this little like thing where it like bounces, so it does have pretty good clear speed as well, but so does ice shards. I mean, those things that are hitting behind is quite fantastic. But we'll go into this map over here for a second. But yeah, really, really good stuff. Just make sure, again, you are using freezing salvo. You can see over here where it has the charges, it's at 11. And then once we come up to like an elite pack, that is when I'm popping this. Or if I see like there's like a bunch of monsters, you can see the clear speed is very, very respectable. But again, if you go to the bosses, expect there to be a little bit more resistance than Lightning Arrow. And Lightning Rod. But that's going to wrap things up. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like on it. Everything will be, again, pinned down below. And if there's any updates, I'll update you guys via the build planner, and also check the pin if there's any other ways to improve the build. Definitely let me know. Like I said, I'm thinking we're going to do cast on freeze, probably like frost wall, and some other like thing. If we can make the projectiles hit the other thing and have the ice shards bounce off of it, I think this build is going to be very, very solid. Anyways, take care, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out.